I tried something new last week with a video called Monthly Movie Mini Reviews that briefly reviewed every movie I watched in the month of June. I thought it might be a fun and interesting look at my rather eclectic movie watching habits, and while no one disliked the video, a good portion of the feedback I received wanted more in-depth reviews, even if that meant fewer movies discussed. So, what I thought I'd try is a supplemental video that does a deeper dive into a movie or two that I found interesting for one reason or another. Today, I'd like to talk about Luca and Raya and the Last Dragon. I love animation. Hand-drawn, CG, stop-motion, whatever. If it's animated, you've probably got my attention. However, it's sadly been several years since I was excited for a Disney or Pixar film. It didn't used to be that way, but for the past 5 or 6 years, the Disney-Pixar marketing has left me cold. So cold. That doesn't mean the movies are bad. They usually range from pretty good to outstanding. It's just the trailers aren't hooking me. And that bums me out. I want to be excited for the new Disney-Pixar film. But, like the trailers for Moana, Coco, Onward, Soul, and most recently Encanto, the trailers for Luca and Raya and the Last Dragon did nothing to pique my interest. Again, they didn't look bad, they just didn't do anything to excite me, and I think that's because at this point in my life I've seen a lot of movies, so when you show me via trailer the broad strokes of the narrative, unless you're doing something particularly unique, it often looks like something I've seen before, and if it looks like something I've seen before, I'm not as excited to see it, even if it was something I enjoyed the first time, or first few times, or first dozen times. So, it may not be Disney Pixar's fault, but I do miss genuinely looking forward to these movies. Hey everyone, Future Andrew here. Sorry for the interruption, but Pixar just dropped the teaser trailer for its new film, Turning Red. And I liked it! I was particularly impressed with the amazing sound design and cinematography of the trailer that wonderfully supports the action by leaning into a suspense and horror vibe while simultaneously keeping it light and genuinely funny. I could have done without the Backstreet Boys needle drop, but Interestingly, Pixar appears to be keeping with a similar style to the one it employed in Luca, kind of a cross between the plasticine characters of the Aardman stop-motion movies and the bean-shaped mouths and stockier body proportions of a large swath of modern American TV animation like Steven Universe. I'm really curious to learn what the metaphor is, because if it's some type of anxiety disorder, representing it with a literal destructive force that could physically hurt others is potentially problematic, but could just as easily be puberty. Either way, I'm actually looking forward to learning more about an upcoming Disney Pixar film. This is great! It's been so long. Anyway, back to past Andrew with the original video. Thanks, future Andrew. Anyway, it was with the mentality of being persistently bummed that Disney Pixar's marketing had long done nothing for me that I went into Luca and Raya. I wasn't excited to watch either of them, but I still figured they'd be pretty good and gave them both a look when they hit Disney Plus last month. And while I liked Luca a lot better than Raya, I still found the latter to be mostly enjoyable, if not as solidly good as the former. Now, I would like to expand on what I said in my mini-review and talk about the theme of Raya and the Last Dragon, or at least my takeaway. And to do that, I have to spoil a sucker, so... Spoiler warning! 500 years ago, people were happy. We lived in harmony and were prosperous. Not because we had our shit together or anything, but because the dragons made it so! See, we're helpless numbnuts, but that's okay, because the dragons are there to do everything for us and keep us in line so we don't destroy ourselves, which is super nice of them. Then, one day, the Droon appeared, yucky smoke monsters that blight the land and turn humans and dragons alike into stone. Now, it's been a month since I watched Raya and the Last Dragon, so I don't recall if the Droon are literal manifestations of human awfulness like the pink slime was in Ghostbusters 2, or if it's just a narrative metaphor, the dragons representing unity and selflessness, the Droon discord and distrust. For the point I'm making, it doesn't matter, but feel free to refresh my memory in the comments. Anyway, because humans are helpless and relied on the dragons for everything, it was up to the dragons to deal with the Droon problem. They did their best to fight them off, but most of them turned to stone. Because even the almighty dragons, literally magic beings, don't have the power to stamp out the analog for human suctitude. So, the few surviving dragons sacrificed themselves by pooling their magic into a crystal orb that would unstone the humans, but not the dragons, and repel the Droon so long as the orb is intact. So, to recap, humans survive. The dragons that they relied on are all gone, save for the titular last dragon, but we'll get there. And the Droon are held at bay so long as the orb is in one piece and isn't, like, you know, smashed to bits because humans are fighting over it. Guess what happens? Over the next 5 centuries, humans split into 5 tribes and there's only one orb, so that's what they fight over. However, our protagonist's daddy, leader of the prosperous tribe that has the orb, is like, we shouldn't fight. We should all get along and break bread together and trust one another. We're still keeping the orb, though. I know you all think our custody of the orb is the reason for our prosperity and your hardship, but trust me, it's not. Nothing would change if you had the orb, and you'll just have to take my word on that because we're still keeping it. Now, don't you worry your pretty little heads over the fact that we keep the orb hidden, surrounded by booby traps, and we train our people from birth in combat arts to keep it safe from you. Just trust us. Like the Mandalorian says, this is the way. So, they all fight over the orb and shatter it into 5 pieces, which means the Droon come back and turn half the population to stone. Luckily, the last dragon is still out there somewhere, and her magic is what keeps the water in the river the tribes live in and on, which is good because, like vampires, the Droon don't cross running water. The bulk of the film takes place 6 years later as Raya finds the last dragon and goes on a quest with representatives of each of the 5 tribes to reunite the orb to unstone the people and drive off the Droon. Again. But because we never learn, our bickering gets the last dragon killed, which causes the water to recede and allows the Droon to run amok, turning everyone to stone. Seeing that it's hopeless, and it is, our protagonists decide to symbolically trust each other by letting one person hold all the orb fragments as the Droon descend upon them. So, dragons are gone, water is gone, protagonists are stone, and the Droon have free reign. But because trusting your fellow person is what the orb magic was based on in the first place, the Droon are once again banished and everyone is unstoned, including the protagonists, and the dragons from 500 years ago. And the last dragon is revived, which brings back all the water. Yay! Other than lost time while stoned, there are no consequences. No one learned anything! We're right back where we started, which means this is all going to happen again and keep happening until the Droon win. And that's why I called Raya and the Last Dragon a depressingly cynical movie. Sadly, probably not inaccurate, though. So, let's move on to Luca, which, while maybe not as realistic in its appraisal of humanity, certainly made me feel better about the world. In my mini-review, I mentioned I had an issue with the film's use of language and the transformation mechanics. What I mean by the former is that, while the film is presented in English, unless you're watching a dub, the story takes place on the Italian Riviera, so ostensibly, all the characters are speaking Italian. As is often done in American movies that take place somewhere else in the world, the characters in Luca often drop words and phrases from the local language into the English dialogue. I've always felt this was, at least partially, a reminder that the characters aren't actually speaking English, much like a set is meant to remind the audience that the actors aren't actually on a stage. So, it's odd to me that our protagonists, Italian kids, who live in Italy, who speak and read Italian, somehow don't understand some of these Italian words and phrases.
What's wrong with you, stupido?
You do it now. Just say the thing.
What's wrong with you, stupido?
That isn't an obscure idiom, and even if stupido were a college-level vocabulary word and not a word literally one letter away from its English counterpart, context alone should tell you what it means. Transforming fish people? Yeah, I buy it. These kids not knowing simple words in their own language? Beyond the pale. Interestingly, online translation services tell me stupido is the correct Italian translation for stupid and dumb, but when I switched over to the Italian dub, the word used is, to my ear, baccato, which the same translation services tell me is either buggy or worm-eaten. Neat. As for the transformation mechanics, the movie seems to play a bit fast and loose with how dry the characters have to be to shift into human form. Sometimes they have to wipe off water, but other times they can just flick it off. None of this matters, but the way my brain works is I start thinking about how their clothes and hair shouldn't be that easy to dry. Both salt and fresh water triggers a transformation, but what about high humidity? What if they walk through a fog bank? Would they transform if they sweated too much on a hot day? Do they sweat? They drink water in the film. Do their insides transform? Would they have to keep their mouths closed for a bit after drinking? Are their mouths ever dry enough to be human? Again, none of this matters, which is why the movie doesn't care about it, but that's just where my brain goes. But what I'd really like to talk about is the movie's theme, which, to me, says, yes, different people are different, and the unknown can be scary, but when you get to know different people, they aren't scary monsters anymore. They're just different people. The only ones you actually need to be wary of are bigots and assholes. And they could be anyone. Even people who look just like you. At the beginning of the movie, humans are afraid fish people will harm them. As with all bigotry, this is based on ignorance, not actual observed behavior. So, I was super pleased to see that at the end of the movie, when the humans and fish people are thrown into a room together, they pretty quickly get over the fact that they look different, have some lunch, and live in harmony forever after. That's not very realistic, but neither are fish people, and besides, people getting along when they have no reason not to makes me happy. A wonderful little fantasy, that is. Yes. Yes. I was also delighted that the film's major antagonist doesn't bully our heroes out of bigotry. He does it because he's an asshole. He gets off on having power over others. That they're fish people is not a factor. But as soon as he finds out they're fish people, he tries to murder them. And the only reason our protagonists weren't killed by the mob of humans at the end of the movie is because they successfully passed as human for a few days before they were outed. That's Luca and Alberto. We know them. They've shown us they're good kids, not the monsters we see them as. So what the movie is actually saying is, if you're discriminated against, all you have to do is hide who you are, just long enough to earn everyone's affection. Then, once they find out how you're different, there's a fair chance they won't murder you with a fishing spear. I mean, some definitely will, but some won't. That is some victim-blamey bullshit. It should not be the victim's responsibility to prove their humanity and justify their existence to bigots. But they did ultimately give the bully the finger, embrace their differences, and live together in peace and harmony, so I may quibble with how they got there and the message that sends, but I like where they got, so that's not nothing. Well, I hope you enjoyed these deeper dives into my thoughts on some of the movies I watched last month. I'll end by recommending a movie to watch and one to avoid. In the future, I'll probably include this section in my monthly movie mini-reviews video, but I didn't think to do this for my debut episode, so I'll do it here. From the movies I watched in June, I recommend you check out House. It's a 70s haunted house movie from Japan about a group of girls with personalities so one-note, their names are literally their one character trait, such as Gorgeous, the pretty one, Melody, the musician, Sweet, the sweet one, and Kung Fu, the one who knows Kung Fu. Yeah, the movie knows exactly what it is and doesn't take itself too seriously. Anyway, the protagonists take a trip to the titular house and get picked off one by one by a malevolent spirit. What makes this one worth a watch are the visuals. I mentioned in my original video the one girl who's bit in the butt by a floating disembodied head, but I didn't mention the one eaten by a piano. Or that the martial artist kicks so much butt, she continues literally kicking after her torso is devoured by a light fixture. And that's before a portrait of a cat bleeds so much that it floods the entire house, which dissolves another girl. Is it good? No! But it is definitely worth seeing. It's never boring. There's always something interesting to look at. The effects are stylish and imaginative, and whatever you end up thinking of the film itself, love it or hate it, you'll never forget it. As for movies you should skip, unless you've got a crush on 70s era James Caan, I think you can safely pass on The Gambler. It's one of those character study movies, this one about a guy who can't get over his own bad behavior and keeps digging himself a deeper and deeper hole that innocent bystanders end up falling into. As you can guess from the title, Caan's character is a gambling addict who can't quite quit while he's ahead. Or behind. The problem for me is, he's a hateful character who never learns anything, never grows, never improves. There's no character arc, just a downward slope. He never hesitates nor shows any qualms about using and hurting other people to get his fix, and it's just an unpleasant, boring watch from front to back. It's also not a movie I've ever heard anyone talk about. Like, I didn't care for Citizen Kane or Dr. Strangelove, but those films are so cemented in the cultural zeitgeist, it's pretty much incumbent upon most film lovers to see them at some point just to understand the myriad references that continue to pop up in modern film and popular culture. The Gambler? Not so much. So, pretty safe one to skip by my estimation, me being some random goofball on the internet, so, you know, grain of salt and all that. So, I think next month I'll try a monthly movie mini-reviews video for everything I watched in July, followed by a supplemental video offering expanded thoughts on the films I felt were most interesting to talk about. Let me know what you think of these videos. I'm perfectly happy to continue to tweak the format and try new things. Till then, happy movie watching!